that every business owner should know, but possibly don't. Okay, Sarah here, aka the Business Fixer. Too many business owners are running their businesses without knowing their key business numbers that actually determine whether the business is going to survive, grow, or even crash and burn. They know maybe roughly what's in the bank. They know if sales feel busy or quiet. They might even know or even remember what they invoiced last month. But the truth is, without a firm grip on your key business numbers, you're going to be making decisions on gut feel, crossed fingers, and hope. And I tell you what, hope is not a strategy. I have seen so many great businesses go under, not because they can't sell, but because they don't understand necessarily the difference between profit and cash. And I know that that might sound patronizing, and I don't mean it in that way, because so often when we are running a business, right, it's an entirely different toolkit, mindset, skill set than it is in terms of doing the day job. And you know what we think in terms of, for example, what we're seeing sitting in the bank account is very different to the numbers that we're potentially seeing on screen in our accounts. And it's understanding those differences, right? Now, I've seen it where business owners are what would appear that they're doing brilliantly until they couldn't afford to pay their VAT bill, right? And I've seen it where they rely so much on their accountant that they treat their accountant like a fortune teller, in the fact that, just tell me if it's okay, if I'm going to be okay. Now, accountants can't do that, right? Even the great accountants. So ultimately, you as the business owner, you need to know your numbers, because otherwise, if you don't, you're not in control, you're guessing. And in business, trust me, guessing can be expensive, right? So, and this is where I really want to share a story with you here, where I learned the hard way that upright doesn't necessarily mean fine, right? And it was one of those slow motion moments where, and I tell you what, it happened in spectacular fashion. A misstep, a flailing grab of the banister, and the kind of tumble that honestly would have scored high in terms of those, you know, those slapstick comedies. If anyone had been filming, you know, the TikToks that you see, the years ago, You've Been Framed, definitely would have been one of those moments, right? And I landed in a heap, a bit shaken, but you know what? I got myself back up. I stood up, I was upright, and therefore in my mind, everything was fine. So I turned the light off, which was what I was intended to do in the first place, climbed back up the stairs, congratulating myself for actually surviving and getting to this point. I reached the landing, I took a few steps towards the bedroom, and bam, the world went black. I completely blacked out. I woke up lying on the carpet, staring at the ceiling, and realised I was literally going to have to crawl to bed because I did not have the physical strength to actually stand up again. And that moment, right, is exactly what running a business without your numbers is like. You think you're fine because you're still standing. You keep going. But the problem has already hit you, but you just haven't necessarily felt the full impact yet. And thinking you're fine because your accountant has your numbers handled is also an incredibly dangerous place to be. You might feel steady because you've handed over that responsibility, but you could still be on the brink of a collapse without even knowing it. For example, if you run a limited company, your accountant has 9 months and 1 day to file your accounts for the previous financial year at Companies House. But by the time you're signing them off, the numbers are likely to be nearly a year old, because they don't generally prepare them straight after the year end. They wait closer to the deadline. And even if you're getting your monthly management accounts from them, you can often still be weeks behind. You cannot make smart decisions in relation to your numbers on stale data. You need to know where you stand today. And don't get me wrong, a great accountant can really help you track your monthly numbers, but they will never monitor them as closely as what you should, right? Most accountants, if they're doing the bookkeeping for you, they'll do them at the end of the month, not daily. They simply don't have the capacity to be literally doing your daily bookkeeping. And ultimately, like, this is where I would say that we recommend that you do, or you have if you have an internal bookkeeper, that they spend, 10 minutes or whatever your business needs in the morning, where they are getting you are getting your bookkeeping, your administrator, whoever it is, up to date, so that you have up to date data daily. It's like an insurance policy, right? If you can see your numbers in real time, you can spot the problems whilst they're still small, okay? And here's something that most people probably don't think about. Even the best accountants, they're human, they make mistakes. Transactions can get miscoded, receipts can get missed, and assumptions can be made. But if you understand your own numbers, you can potentially catch those errors early and question anything that might not necessarily look right. At the end of the day, your accountant is there to support you, but the responsibility is still on your shoulders. You're still the business owner, right? And when you know your numbers and you keep them up to date, you're putting yourself back into control, okay? So I'm going to go through with you now some key numbers that you should be tracking and how you potentially track them. Now, some of them might seem obvious and some of them might not, okay? But I want to go through these things, and I'd rather give you everything that you need to know than just assume, because assumptions are the mother of all F-ups, that you know all of these or some of these, okay? So the first one, your revenue or turnover, whatever you want to call it. Now, this is the total amount of money that is coming into your business, mostly from sales, okay? There are sometimes other ways in which you can generate income, but ultimately the revenue is from your sales. It's the number that we all love to talk about. It's the big shiny number, but it can also hide a multitude of sins. You can have record-breaking sales, but still be losing money, particularly if your costs are too high. So to give you a prime example, right? You could be generating $500,000 in revenue. Sounds incredibly impressive. But if your total costs are, say, 600,000, you're running at 100K loss. The bank doesn't care how high your turnover is if there isn't enough left to pay all of your bills, right? So what do? You need to make sure that you are checking your revenue weekly in Xero, using your profit and loss or whatever account system you're using. I'm using Xero as an example because that's what I recommend. Using the profit and loss report for a month to date and compare it with your monthly target. Yes, you should have a monthly target, and the same period from last year, and see whether there's a difference. Gross profit and gross profit margin. Right, your gross profit is your revenue minus your direct costs. So what are direct costs? They're the costs of delivering your product or service. Like, for example, in trades, you'll have materials. If you're a plumber, you might have a boiler. All of these things are literally the cost for you to provide the delivery. Your gross profit margin is that number that is expressed usually as a percentage of your revenue. So to give you an example, let's talk about this in real numbers so you can understand it. If you sell £10,000 worth of services, but it costs you £4,000 to deliver them, your gross profit is 6,000, and therefore your margin is 60%. If your margin starts to drop, it's a sign that your direct costs are increasing, or you are over delivering, or you are undercharging. So make sure you work these things out. And you should be checking this every month at a minimum. Okay, but because your costs often, they will change, and at the moment, cost of living, everything seems to be going up. So in your zero, take your revenue and your direct costs from your profit and loss and subtract the cost from the revenue, right? You'll see this in your profit and loss. It will do it for you, but what it won't then do is do your gross profit margin, which is then what you need to do is times by 100 and you'll get your percentage. Okay, so gross profit divided by revenue times by 100 gives you your gross profit margin. I appreciate this is a lot for you to absorb, but hopefully you'll get some really useful tips from this. Net profit and net profit margin. So this is the net profit is what is left after every single expense in your business. So your overheads, your wages, your rent, your marketing, insurance, everything. And then your net profit margin expresses that again as a percentage. So for most service-based business owners, I would say a healthy net profit margin is 40 to 60%. And if you're consistently below that range, you might need to have a think about in terms of are you pricing enough, or potentially are your costs too high? So for example, and I like to do examples, 100k in revenue with 50k in total expenses, that gives you a 50k net profit and a 50k and a 50% margin. So again, you do exactly the same process as what you do with your gross profit margin, in that you go into zero, it will show you what your net profit is, and then you calculate your profit margin. So it's your net profit divided by revenue times by 100. Okay, that will tell you those numbers. You really do need to be clear on this. Break-even point. Now, I hope most of you know what this is, but it's effectively the minimum amount you need to sell to be able to cover your costs, right? Think of this as, and I like this phrase, is the amount you need to do to get you need to earn to keep the doors open, right? So step one is knowing your expenses. So you need to know what that number is, everything that it takes to run your business. You should have this clear and set out. Sometimes, like I do, even though I use Xero, I still have a spreadsheet that just has the expenses, because what that does is it shows me when they come out of the bank. So, and I break it down week by week, so I know what I need to actually generate week by week. Okay. The step two is then knowing the cost of delivering your product or service. So that's your gross profit. Once you have both, you can then calculate, right? So for example, if your monthly expenses are 20,000 and what your gross profit margin is 50%, so that's the costs, the direct costs that you have to incur to be able to deliver, then you know that you need £40,000 in sales to be able to cover your costs. Anything below that means you're losing money. Anything above is profit. That's if you have direct costs. If you don't have direct costs, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to calculate. Right. The sheets in which you should be, or the reports that you should be looking at in your account software: profit and loss and balance sheet. So your profit and loss shows the income and expenses, income generated, expenses incurred over a set period. It's basically like a running scorecard as to whether your business is making or losing money. This is a really important report, and it will differ to what's in your bank. Okay. Your balance sheet is a snapshot of the financial position at a specific point. So that is what your business owns and what your business owes. So think of it as things like assets, so cash in the bank, unpaid invoices, stock, property, for example. And whereas the liabilities, as in what is owed, that's suppliers' invoices, any loans, any tax that's due, any other outstanding payments, right? Both of these documents, reports, matter, okay? Cash in the bank versus profit. Okay, this is one of the biggest things, okay? So often what we do is we look at the bank balance and we say, oh, we've got 50k there, that's all well and good, that's amazing, right? But what you are, and you think, okay, I've got 50 grand that I can spend, great. No, because that 30k of that 50 could be earmarked for tax. 10,000 could be earmarked for suppliers' invoices. And then you've also got payroll of 5 grand, for example, next week. So you've only actually then genuinely got £5,000 to play with. So you need to be aware that just because it's in the bank doesn't mean that you can actually spend it. And you also need to be looking at that against what your actual profit is, because remember, depending on how your accounts are set up, the profit, it could be money that you've generated, but you haven't actually necessarily received all of that revenue in the bank yet. Okay, so the next thing, cost of client acquisition. Now, this may sound like a jargony thing, okay, but this is something you should also be aware of. What it is it's the cost it is to win a client. So that could be your marketing spend, it could be sales time, or any other related costs. So for example, if you spend £2,000 on marketing in a month, and in that marketing you then land 4 new clients, you've then got an acquisition cost on a very simple basis of £500 per client, right? If your average client then spends less than £500 with you, you're immediately losing with every sale, right? So make sure you're tracking this. You'll be able to track it by looking at your marketing and sales costs in Xero and dividing that by the number of clients that you have won that's in your CRM. Okay, make sure that you are tracking this type of information. You know, even the simplest things, are you actually tracking how many sales you're actually getting each month? Not just the revenue you get from the sales, but how many sales. Because you can't work that cost of client acquisition out if you haven't worked out how many clients you're winning each month. Okay, your average client value. So this is the average client amount of money that they're spending with you over their entire relationship with your business. It is the number that helps you decide whether you can afford to spend, how much you can afford to spend to win them, right? So if the average client, for example, spends £1,000 a month and they stay with you for a year, that's a £12,000 average client value. But if they stay 3 years, that's 36,000. So this will then change the way in which you are marketing. Your marketing spend is calculated if you have got regular clients that worth £36,000, right? So you do this by calculating by dividing the total revenue, the amount of money that you're getting in sales, by the number of clients, and then multiplying it by the average lifespan. You should again know this information. So some of these calculations, you've got to know other basic information to be able to even get these numbers in front of you. Okay, the next thing, conversion rates. The conversion rates are a really important one, okay, because this tells you how effective you are in turning your leads into paying clients. So you're going to be tracking things from both the lead to the sales conversation and the sales call to the actual to the level of sales that you make. So for example, if you get 100 leads and you book 10 sales calls out of those 100 leads, your lead to call conversion is 10%. If half of those calls then become clients, your call to sale conversion is 50%, but your overall lead to sale rate is only 5%. Okay, so you need to be knowing these numbers on a month by month basis and seeing whether they fluctuate up or down, because obviously the better your conversion rate, it means then you don't need to have as high a volume of leads to be able to get the same level of sales. Okay, I would say as a guide, many service-based businesses should be aiming for a 20 to 30% lead to call and a 40 to 60% call to sale, but this does vary by industry and offer. Okay, debtors outstanding. I don't know about you, but I've always had this issue with debtors and creditors, and this is why I love Xero, because it calls them aged receivables. So it's nice to be able to remember they're people that actually owe you money. So this is the total value of your unpaid invoices. So this is the money you've earned but you've not yet received, and it can make or break your cash flow. So if you've got £30,000 worth of unpaid invoices and your monthly costs are 20k, that one late payer could put you in the red, right? So you always need to be doing a report, aged receivables report, I would say weekly, and follow up on anything that's overdue. things like Xero, you can actually also have an automated system to be able to actually send reminders out. Think about also your debtor time to pay. So this is the average number of days it takes clients to pay you. The longer it takes, the more strain it puts on your cash flow. Wherever possible, set your payment terms to 7 or 14 days, or even payment on receipt. Try and avoid 30 days or more. Shorter term helps keep cash moving. And Xero will tell you this information. If you actually look into it in terms of your individual clients, you'll be able to see what the average time frame is. Creditors, so who you owe money to, right? You need to know how much you owe to your suppliers and when it's due. Managed well, this means that it helps keep the cash in the business without damaging relationships. You want to literally, you don't necessarily want to pay everything straight away because you want to keep some cash in the bank. So this is a bit of a game. Obviously, you don't want to be paying people late. And I know sometimes with cash flow, I've been in that situation where I know that I need to be paying people, but I don't physically have the cash flow to do it. It's a juggling act, right? But what you need to do is make sure that you try not to pay late. If you are in a situation where you're struggling, call the supplier. Communication is key, right? But what you should be doing is check your aged payables report weekly in Xero, so you can then plan your payments strategically. Tracking these key numbers will give you all of these key numbers will give you a clear picture of your business health before problems can then become expensive. Right, now, there was a lot there for you to absorb, okay? But what I really want to stress on you, and this is something I've seen so many times with clients, is that they become phobic, literally phobic about their numbers. They are too scared to open their profit and loss. They're scared to go do any bookkeeping, sometimes even scared to even look at the bank account because of their worst fears, right? The idea of discussing profit margins or debtor days just feels like a foreign language. Does any of this sound like you, right? Or, some of these things that I've just gone through now in terms of the key numbers, does it sound like a foreign language, right? The key thing here is the first step is breaking down as to what each number actually means in plain, no jargon English, right? And what I like to do is show you how to use your systems to be able to get that information, which I've just given you a brief snapshot, okay? With our clients, when we have done this and shown them how to do it, within a few months, our clients have been transformed in terms of their relationship with numbers, right? They went from avoiding the numbers to competing with them. Vague sales targets turned into beating them. Margins were defended like a championship title. Debtor days become a race to improve each month, right? And bookkeeping then stops becoming a chore, right? You then become informed, you're in control and ahead of the game, right? These numbers matter. They're not just figures on a page, they are the story of your business. Without them, you are literally running blind. You might get lucky for a while, but eventually you will hit a problem that you didn't see coming. With them, you can see what's really happening in your business, make decisions based on facts, and take action before small issues turn into expensive problems. You can grow in a way that's sustainable and profitable, and you can keep more of the money you work so hard to earn, because ultimately that's what you want to do. This isn't about turning you into an accountant. It's not about not using an accountant because they are a valuable resource. It's about making sure that you have a handle on your own numbers. It's about being the kind of business owner who is in control, not the one that wants to be caught out on the landing wondering what just happened, okay? So if you want to get a handle on your numbers and you perhaps feel like either your accountant isn't necessarily explaining things and how you need to know, or you don't have an accountant, or you're kind of in this dark place like I was when I went splat on the landing, and you want to get a handle on them and you want some real guidance. Now, I'm not an accountant. I don't hold myself out to be. and there are certain things that I turn to my accountant and be like, help. Okay, but what I do is help business owners so that they can understand their numbers from a business owner's perspective, and actually, like I say, have a competition with yourself in terms of beating those sales targets and feeling comfortable that you can look at it and actually understand what's going on and knowing that they are accurate so you can make informed decisions. If you would like to have a chat about your numbers, then what you need to make sure that you do is book yourself in for a free business performance strategy session. It's literally 45 minutes to an hour of time with me. We'll look at your numbers, and we'll see where you are with your business, where you ultimately want to be, and how I can help you get there. So if you can see the link that's going across the screen, if not, just simply comment the word performance, and we can get you booked in the diary. So thanks guys for listening. It's been a bit of a long one. Make sure that you save this. Please share it with anybody who you feel might benefit from it. And if you aren't already subscribed to things like my LinkedIn or my YouTube, then please do so. Thanks guys, and I will see you all again next week. Take care.